Circuit 2020.
And recording in progress.
Well, good evening to the Services Committee meeting. It is November 2nd, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Is a call to order. Roll call.
Joe St. John,
Here.
Damon Capel,
Absent.
Murray Neff,
Here.
John Grumney,
Here.
present.
Right, good deal. And I am filling in for Damon Capel this evening. He had previously scheduled vacation with his family. Good for him. The Services Committee did have a meeting on October 5th, 2022. I believe all members were present, and we're looking for a motion to pass the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Murray Neff,
Second.
second by John Grumney. Discussion. Roll call.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
John Grumney.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We're on the visitors section this evening. About 20 folks in the audience. Would anybody like to speak with the Services Committee this evening? Okay. Thank you. On to unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business that the Services Committee would like to render untabled and for discussion?
I do not have anything.
Okay, no rendering from Mr. Grumney. Any rendering from Mr. Murray? Yeah. Right, we're right on to new business. We're on track for a 6-minute meeting. All right, new business. First discussion point is the thoroughfare and traffic control planning. Thank you. I believe we'll kick this over to Mr. Hall.
You look in your packet, we prepared a memo just to go over. Get that open here. 2-page memo basically outlining really just a brainstorm list of what we're looking at as far as traffic and thoroughfare planning. Splitting those into 2 groups, one being short-term, which we're currently looking at a few of those items, and then long-term items. And long-term, I don't mean, a year from now. Those are things that just, aren't like immediate concerns that we have on our plate right now. So just to go through the short-term items. First one, some traffic control items. I know the Miller Drive signals are of a concern. Our office is looking at what it would take to retime those. Just a note on that. So from MP Dory, who maintains your signal system, we have obtained all the timing information from them, and they've opened all the traffic control cabinets and taking photos, and they sent those to us as well. So we have photos and timing information on every signal that they sent to us. So that's kind of a base information, so we know what the existing timing is at each signal. That said, the 4 signals at Miller Drive are being looked at. Kidner Parkway is another signal, and that's actually not connected to your the signals around the Kroger site, I'll call it, are connected by a radio system. The Kidner Parkway system stands alone. So one short-term recommendation that we're thinking about is connecting that to the other signals so that can be timed appropriately, as noted there on item 2, just to provide gaps for Cheshire Road and some of the private drive accesses between Miller and Kentner. Another short term is just evaluating removing the permitted left on State Route 61. That intersection is of concern lately, just from a safety standpoint. So as traffic's moving southbound or westbound on 3 coming towards that intersection, this would be that left turn movement going north on 61. So we want to look at that intersection. Item A4 there is just an inventory of all the assets and other issues. So want to kind of get a full inventory of all the signals and timing and so on. Any pause there just for other thoughts on short-term traffic control items that would be of concern? Moving on to Part B, thoroughfare planning, short-term. Sunbury Parkway 3637 intersection, looking at alternatives there. In addition to the alternatives, the right-of-way planning and the alignment of the Little Walnut Creek Interceptor Sewer, which we'll go over next. Also looking at the Sunbury bypass route analysis, this would just be a big picture as regional growth continues and the Intel facility is constructed. Just looking at alternatives for bypass route around Sunbury that we can then have discussions with the county and ODOT to facilitate that planning component. Also listed just, even with the regional growth and Intel, if there is a bypass, I think that'll help with truck traffic, but there'll still be increased traffic through your downtown area being the square. So there are a few pinch points there, being the square itself along 37, what I'll call the State Route 37 bend, which is at Cherry and Morning, and then just the restriction of the lane width and the width of the lanes on 37 going up the hill towards Johnstown. Sunbury Parkway planning, we listed as a short-term item, and I know the district planning, item 1 there is in process. Just continuing with regional planning on that and right-of-way planning. So that's kind of a quick overview of initial brainstorm list of short-term items that we've thought about as far as traffic and thoroughfare.
On the Sunbury bypass, what would a realistic time frame be on that? Knowing that we're going to be having congestion start with Intel.
Good question. It really depends on, it's obviously a large project, so it's going to require ODOT involvement, county TID involvement, other partners. So we just need to begin that process, and then I think we can start to build some framework on scope and schedule and budget.
Context, Sunbury Parkway was envisioned 10, 12 years ago, and there hasn't been a shovel worth of dirt moved yet. So, and that was with control of property. So I guess just to summarize from the business perspective or from the community perspective, there's things that, and I think Wes hit on many of these things. They're tactical things that we can do to address existing traffic and mitigate the impact right now. I think we've adjusted slightly to the school location change, the high school location change, but traffic patterns have changed. There are still ongoing improvements both on the east and west side of 37, which in theory could free up more capacity, but we still have the same pinch points through Cherry Street. So some of the other, the larger investment items are where you're actually adding pavement, adding turn lanes, and some of these larger, I'll say technological type advancements like smart signals, using radar and camera systems to dynamically adapt to existing traffic patterns. And if you think of adding new turn lanes, which a lot of folks are like, just put in a stop sign or put in a turn lane. Those are not only big upfront expenses, but again, I encourage you to always look at these decisions that you're making, not just 20 years down the line, but 50, 100, how many times is that pavement going to be repaved? And just consider it a long-term liability in terms of adding additional pavement. Thank you, Wes.
Sure.
Anything else?
The other short-term item I just wanted to add would be Granville Street from the square to State Route 3. We're going to look at some alternatives there as far as not really changing the pavement width, but potentially doing a center turn lane that pavement's wide enough that there's. Take a look at that, and then take a look at Sunbury Meadows Drive itself for any traffic calming items. So I wanted to add that to our short-term list.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Can you maybe give some specific examples of what you mean by traffic calming?
A couple examples would be because of the width of that pavement it's 36 feet to the back of the curb, so about 35 feet from face to face, or, I believe that is 36 feet from face to face. It's 37 back of curb. So you have enough width there, and the reason that collector street was put at that width is to allow street parking on both sides and still maintain 2 through lanes. So you don't want to run into a condition on your collector street like you would a side street. If there's a single lane of car parking, you have to wait until the other vehicle comes, and you don't want to have a situation like that on a collector. But when no cars are parked there, it's a very wide pavement, so speeding can occur just because of the visibility and the openness of that street. A couple thoughts would be to put what's called a curb bump out. So you would, because there is on-street parking, which is 6 to 8 feet off of your curb, you would basically build a new curb 6 to 8 feet out into the existing pavement, and then you would taper that back and put tree. You'd put a street tree and some plantings in that bump out, so it adds landscaping, and that really defines the edge of the curb parking area. So by bringing landscaping in and actually creating some curb and making that narrow, still allowing 2 through lanes, that's a traffic calming feature that can happen. There's obviously, speed tables, if you've ever been into Columbus, and some other communities will do. It's like a large speed bump with a flat top, where we would probably steer away from initially any in pavement through lane type obstruction. Plow drivers and fire trucks don't really like those. Those are, and they become an annoyance. So we'll probably go with more of what I'll call side treatments to do traffic calming, which could be additional landscaping or bump outs. So
For clarification, is this all of Sunbury Meadows Drive, or is this on the east side of 3?
good question. I drove it again this evening. Probably looking at towards the northern portion as you approach Granville, or that latter portion, not the portion towards 3.
Okay. And this is in the communities at Sunbury, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
John lives in Sunbury Meadows and Murray Dustin, so they're asking on their side of the street, same width,
Yeah.
but also it
Sure.
doesn't have the
that would be,
throughput
Gotcha. Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
that would be
Okay.
applicable on the east and west sides. And, as to where that treatment would occur, we could discuss that further.
I'm just curious. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
sure,
you.
Sure. Moving on to long-term, just to overview that quickly. Looking at a variety of items there, upgrading the traffic controllers, the detection systems, and I mean by radar or video instead of just being on a cycle timer, which it is now. Implement a central system, and that would mean a fiber connected, centrally controlled system that you could change timing on the fly. Further down, you see specialized timing for events or school hours. If there's fireworks event, a parade, you could change timing with a central system quickly to accommodate that. Instead of trying to have an officer at the traffic control box, which you see a lot trying to modify timing, you could do that from a central location. Connecting, adding detection to the signals at the square. Fiber connection would be that fiber backbone to really connect up your traffic signals to a central system. You could use cell in the short term. Smart lighting, along with smart poles, could run off the fiber system as well. Citywide preemption just for police and fire, and you've seen those that turns all the lights green where the emergency vehicle is trying to travel, and would turn all your side streets red. Thoroughfare planning long-term. Just recommending to really update the overall thoroughfare plan as we update our land use plan that would generate traffic, that would suggest a overall thoroughfare plan update. I think as we're talking about bypass and a lot of development occurring, it'd be prudent to do that. And then also then take that and develop a overall traffic model that we could coordinate with the Mid Ohio Regional Planning Commission and ODOT. And that becomes a real good base model. And this is a desktop traffic model that's done in software called Synchro. And as any new development comes in with a demand, we could have a really apples to apples kind of comparison, and not having each developer do a traffic impact study with criteria that they may be using, and we can plug that into a master model and really look at how that impacts the systems within the city. Few miscellaneous items there, just focused on funding as we move through this, keeping all funding sources in mind from the outside funding sources. Looking at fair share contributions from developments within the city and developments outside the city. Considering our current roadway and traffic impact fees that were just passed, and then what would be any budget needed to be set locally through city funding. So those are things that we need to keep in mind.
Anything else on thoroughfare planning?
No, thank you.
I'll take a moment and normally don't do this, but I think we've got a little time. I think it's very relevant. This is from the Sunbury Comprehensive Plan. I assume since our last meeting, everybody's read every word of it. Sure. But on page 67, it talks about the patterns of development. This is, I think, extremely relevant right now. Traffic can be reduced by the design of the development and the mix of land uses. Consideration should be given to traditional neighborhood designs like the original Sunbury plat. A typical home in an exclusively residential area generates 10 or more trips per day. I just want to count of the times my wife and I left the house. And if I didn't have a city council meeting, I probably would have left 2 times again this evening. A home located in a neighborhood that is designed to be convenient for walking and biking with mixed commercial and service uses can reduce auto trips to as little as 4 trips per home per day. So this is about traffic impact studies and ITE. So ITE is an assessment of trip generation. So an assessment of ITE trip generation rates should be submitted by the developer as part of any planned development. As a general rule, if the trip generation is more than 1,000 vehicles per day, a full-fledged traffic impact study should be performed to determine the impact and mitigation measures needed. I'm going to go on. Impact fees. The Beaver Creek, Ohio Supreme Court case allows villages and cities to charge fair share impact fees to offset cost of off-site road improvements caused by large developments. Even small development details such as providing tree islands and commercial parking lots can reduce the level of ground ozone and should be a consideration in the zoning process when reviewing new development plans. Pedestrian scale traditional neighborhood designs like Old Sunbury are effective in reducing auto trips and lowering ozone emissions. I'm just going to go to one more thing here, 2 more. Complete streets, a term coined by the American Bikes Board. Complete streets is a term used to accommodate the need for integrated, connected street networks that serves all of its users, including motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians, and transit riders of all ages and all abilities. And then the last thing I was going to mention is minor collector streets within platted subdivisions should also be considered for traffic calming devices. Major collectors, and these are actually technical terms. So minor collectors, major collectors, minor arterials, major arterials are different types of streets. Major collectors should consider the construction of bike paths on both sides of the street when traffic warrants it. Subdivisions that are platted along existing collector streets may stipulate that bike paths or sidewalks be constructed as part of the city or regional system. I think this is some relevant information in here related to traffic calming and just development standards. And I think we, as a general rule, should probably take an extremely close look at any right-of-way section that we're planning to approve in any development. All right. What else do we have here this evening? Sanitary sewer collection system.
In your packet, there was an exhibit for the Little Walnut Creek sewer. I just wanted to go over that. It has some green and some blue. And so what this is the next phase of the Little Walnut Creek sewer. It currently ends at Golf Course and Cheshire Road. The green area represents, so the western edge of that green area is South Galena Road, and that's the western edge of our agreement with Delaware County Regional Sewer District to provide service from east of Galena Road. So the green area represents a area that would be tributary to a pump station. Shown there in the middle, it's like a small white dot there. I know the print in your packet there is fairly small. There would have to be a gravity line that would come north from that pump station, and it shows up better on a PDF on this print. It's kind of faded in there, but it continues north out of that pump station and goes on the western side of St. John Newman Church property, and then comes back over to Carter's Corner and then projects north. So everything within that green area could flow by gravity to that trunk line north of the pump station. So the bigger picture concept here is that we're just doing our final gravity trunk sewer planning areas, one being green, one being blue, that would service that the Little Walnut Creek sewer phase 2 would service. So the blue area then represents a trunk sewer that would run from its current location, which ends at Golf Course in Cheshire, run up to where Sunbury Parkway is going to come through. That would continue east along Sunbury Parkway and then cut across 36 and then continue north. And this is pretty relevant because we are looking right now at that intersection of where Sunbury Parkway would connect to 36. So what I like about this concept is that aligns with Sunbury Parkway, and it really maximizes the gravity service area for this sewer. Reason that we can't push that blue further west is because the grade starts to drop off towards Little Walnut Creek. So this blue area would be the gravity tributary area to that sewer north of 36. So just wanted to present this to show that we have prepared some conceptual design document here. We're going to continue to move through design of that, and then we're going to come back with recommended phasing on this sewer. So that first phase, for example, may go from Golf Course Cheshire up to where Sunbury Parkway would be, and then continue into this, which could then service the Kittner Crossing development. And then we could abandon the current Cheshire Road pump station.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Sure. We'll prepare some better graphics of the phasing and more of a blow up. And I could also send a PDF that you could.
Yeah, I'll
See
forward
that.
the PDF to the
Okay.
committee,
Okay,
so it's easier to see.
sure.
Yeah, the pump station, the green area, just so that committee knows, that's not an extremely small feat whatsoever. That's a
not.
large one, and we're crossing, Columbus water source. And
Be similar to the Sunbury Meadows lift station, which is we call a triplex submersible. So it's a fairly large pump station. The gravity sewer would come in on the north side. The force main would go from there due west to Domigan or along the Sunbury Parkway alignment and then connect into the gravity sewer. So that's how that would work. And
the pump station in Sunbury Meadows 15, 18 years ago was $1.5 million, something like that.
correct. Yep. It's about
Today's dollars, it's 25 million.
So that's just wanted to provide an update that we are working on that, and there's a lot of development interest in the area. I think it's prudent to start moving forward with phase 2 here quickly.
Thank you very much, Wes. Sure. Any other comments or questions on sanitary sewer collection system? All right, we're on to other business, gas and electric aggregation services. Mr. Hennessy.
Yes, so I just wanted to update the committee on what's happening with natural gas and electric aggregation in the city, and just get a little bit of guidance in terms of next steps. So just by way of background, in 2011, the city passed an ordinance and held an election that allows the city to basically enter into an opt-out aggregation program for natural gas and electricity. And what that means essentially is that the city can work with a broker, identify cost, purchase, contracts that reduce the overall or potentially reduce the overall cost to citizens who participate as a part of this program. But every citizen or small business that's eligible has the opportunity to opt out. So that's important to note. Today, my understanding is that about 40 to 50% of the households and small businesses already have a separate agreement, whether that's through some sort of a apples to apples comparison, or whether it's through a small business agreement with the service provider. So a large number of individuals and small businesses already have an agreement. They would not be subject to an aggregation agreement. It's anybody who is a free agent, essentially. And I've been told that when you go through an opt-out process, about 10% of the citizens are likely to opt out just because they're, would prefer to either shop it themselves or just aren't really confident in maybe what the city is proposing. So the ordinance was passed, an election was held. The residents said that the city could serve as an aggregator for them. And the next thing that happened is we developed an operations plan, submitted to the PUCO that plan, and now we have a certificate to be able to offer this program. So that's important because you have to file annual reports in order to be able to retain those certificates. And there's an biannual renewal process. Generally, the broker has helped the city maintain its certificates through the years. We have a certificate renewal that's coming up, and that's the reason why we've got this in front of you tonight, just to get a little bit of guidance in terms of where you want to go. As I mentioned, our program involved a broker agreement. The city had entered into an agreement with a broker who has helped do these aggregations in the past. And like I said, does all of the things that we had just talked about them doing. That said, kind of the current status of our program. You may remember earlier this year in I think February or March, something like that. You may have received a letter that said that the city's natural gas and electric providers had gone bankrupt. It was Volunteer Energy, and that all residents would be returned to basically the supplier rate. So that happened earlier this year, and for the most part, we had done nothing to kind of reinstitute an aggregation program here in the city of Sunbury. The large reason for why that happened, or at least what they'll say, is that happened. Energy prices spiked early in the year as a result of the supply chain disruption and the war that broke out overseas. Our previous provider had purchased or had not pre-purchased the commodity at a discounted rate, and they were basically caught having to purchase at a high price, provided a low price, and basically decided that that was a losing venture for them, and so they declared bankruptcy. So, like I said, the residents went back to AEP. They're essentially operating under a blended annual rate. It went up from about 4.88 cents per kilowatt hour, is now sitting at around 7.3 cents today. Experts expect this number to go up in the out years, and that's important because as we talk about an aggregation program, we want to talk about, the potential to maybe offset some of this increase. The residents also, like I said, went back to Columbia Gas based upon a variable monthly rate that it was as high as $1 per cubic foot earlier this year. It's now around 85 cents per cubic foot. So in addition to the citizens having an aggregation program, the city has public assets where its accounts, which were not a part of the aggregation system, but we had entered into separate agreements with AEP and, well, I should say through our broker, we had entered into separate agreements on gas and electric. Our program, though, did not automatically revert back to AEP and Columbia Gas. Since that time, though, we have taken all of the city's assets, we have put them on the AEP rate, and that is the best rate going at the moment. If you think about just doing that, cut our electric costs, future electric costs by about 50%. So it's important to pay attention to what these rates are. On the natural gas front, we have a combination of Columbia Gas and a second supplier. So our rate is actually higher than that 80 cents per cubic foot rate that residents are receiving. We're probably somewhere around, I'm told around 85 cents or something per cubic foot. If we work with a broker, we could get that number down. We could probably save an additional 15% plus or minus if the city wanted to go in that direction. So I'll talk a little bit about that, but are there any questions in terms of kind of where we are at the moment and what the aggregation program is? Okay.
So it's gonna be able to save money for people most likely.
Yeah, well, it should, but it's important to note that generally when you enter into an aggregation agreement, you're entering into some locked price. You know, the future commodity prices may change, they may go down, and you've got residents that are locked into a price that is higher maybe than the current rate might be. So there is some risk associated with entering into an aggregation agreement. Like I said, at the moment.
But just to clarify, residents, our program has always allowed for residents to opt out of that.
Correct. Yep, they can opt out. That's right. Yeah, absolutely. If they don't like our rate or they think that they see a different path in the future, they can certainly opt out. And again, or they can shop their own. They can shop their own rates separately. This is the apples to apples comparison that you may have heard about on the PUCO website.
Could they opt out at any time, or is it just one set?
So they can opt out when you offer the aggregation program initially. They got 21 days to do that. And then if you opt out at some later point, there is a penalty associated with it for the resident or for the city if we were to do that.
Has there always been a penalty? I don't recall that.
There has always been a penalty, yes.
I thought there was an annual opportunity to opt out. They would have it once a year.
Well, yeah, I'll confirm if it's an annual opportunity to opt out or if it's only at the outset of the contract. So it's important to note these contracts may be longer than a year. I mean, they could be 2 years, they could be 3 years. I don't think it's been our history to do longer than that. So
Done a year.
yeah, so maybe that's the reason that the annual opt-out program happens each year, but I'll confirm that. That's a good question. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And what I've identified is there is an immediate need or an immediate decision I think that the city needs to make. And I just want to make sure I get some feedback from this group. And if you think we should take this to council, I just want to make sure we get it on the council agenda as well. And that is that our PUCO certificate renewal, our biennial renewal is coming up this year. Generally, the broker takes care of that for us. The organization that was operating as our broker before, we have discontinued that relationship. And so we need to do something this year if we want to keep the certificate active. The renewal is due by the end of the month. So not a lot of time. It's not a difficult thing to do, but it needs to be done. If we fail to file the renewal, and we wanted to offer an aggregation program in the future, we have to go back and start over. A new ordinance and a new election, a new operations plan. So it's a lengthy process if we miss this window.
So if we approve by the end of the month, that doesn't obligate us to go forward with hiring a broker. It doesn't obligate us to go forward with an aggregated program. It affords us the ability to explore those further.
That's exactly right. And that was my next note. Renewal does not require an aggregation. It does not require us to offer an aggregation program. It just keeps our certificate active. So we have paid the annual fee, at least with respect to gas. We've got to track down the electric piece. So there are a few things, again, that the broker has taken care of in the past, and we need to make sure we're taking care of for us. So I assume that that's what you would want us to do, and we're moving in that direction unless told otherwise. I assume that's where we should continue to go. Having said that, we have interviewed 3 brokers. These are names that were given to us through a variety of sources. Staff has interviewed those at the moment. So the question is, would you like us to develop a recommendation from that, maybe develop a procedure for the committee to hear from them, if we're interested in engaging a broker? I think there's value in engaging a broker.
If nothing else, for the educational component, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would like a staff recommendation. My number 1 criteria would be speak in human terms. Don't get into the futures of oil prices in Oman.
Mm-hmm.
Please talk to us like we're 5th graders and just reduce our risk. Give us options, please.
Well, I think of the 3 choices that we've interviewed, 2 could provide the services. So we could certainly go back and, as a staff, develop a recommendation, come back to council or to this committee and talk about next steps. All right, so we will, that's one thing we will do. The other sort of next step that I just want a little bit of feedback on is with respect to electric issues. Like I said, the public assets have already been entered into, we have already been shifted back to AEP. We've reduced our electric costs by 50%. We're basically where every other resident, every other citizen is. That's the best rate going. Nobody thinks you need to do anything on the electric side. The natural gas side, as I'd indicated, there we are paying a rate that's higher than the resident rate at the moment. There is a potential to save about 15% if we entered into an agreement on that, given today's pricing. Natural gas prices change monthly. Electric prices change annually. So there's a lot more volatility happening on the natural gas side. So at a minimum, I think we could certainly deal with the public assets and reduce our costs pretty quickly through an administrative act. The only other question then is if we are interested in having, and maybe this is where a broker who comes back in front of the group and provides a little bit of education could tell you a little bit more about the value of providing an aggregation service for the residents as it relates to natural gas, what those options might look like. I'm not the expert, so I don't want to pretend to be on that front. There is an opportunity for some savings, but there's also, there's also an opportunity again that prices could go in an opposite direction, and we end up with a rate that's maybe higher than what citizens might be able to get on their own. So,
I'd like them to come talk to us about the value if that's possible. I like the idea of reducing the cost up front and stabilization to get rid of the volatility. Obviously, in these days, volatility is not prices going down. So that's something to take into account. It's usually going up and increasing. So I like the fact that we can reduce the cost up front and stabilize the pricing. I reduce costs, if I understand correctly.
Yep.
But I'd still like to hear them out.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Other thoughts or comments?
I don't know that we want to have all 3 provide an opinion at this point.
Yeah.
I would wait until we have a recommendation and we're starting down the path of potentially entering into an agreement.
And that's the way I wrote it down. Recommend a broker. Once we can settle on the broker, we'll get the broker in to educate on the options and go from there. As far as the public assets, like I said, we can do that through an administrative process and realize some savings on that front. So I assume we want to proceed in that direction.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's what we needed. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are we going to go into a lot of detail on establishing the stormwater utility or the Sunbury ArcGIS at this point? Okay.
Yeah.
We're proceeding with both. One thing on the stormwater utility is we are going to start collecting needs. So think about any needs that you may have or know of, and we'll be collecting a list on those needs. So
that's it. When you say needs in this category, detention ponds, retention ponds, stormwater pipes, floodplains, things like that.
any reoccurring street flooding issues, backyard drainage, existing detention facilities that need attention, any culverts, storm sewers, catch basins.
CVS parking lot.
Just right. You know, on the private side, we could just put that on the list. We can't spend public dollars, but anything associated with stormwater at all. So.
Okay.
Think about
Good job. All right, thank you. All right, any other unfinished business? Yeah. Nope. I just wanted to follow up from our last city council meeting. We had AEP representatives here. They followed up with me afterwards. I'm meeting with their chief operating officer tomorrow, taking a half day at work to go do some work and looking forward to that. And I'll bring back comments from that conversation. All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Second by Mr. Neff. Next meeting is December 7th at 6:30. Discussion? Roll call.
Joe St. John,
Yes.
Murray Neff,
Yes.
John Grumney,
Yes.
Gardner.
Thank you.